Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever worked hard on a delicious meal, put it in the office fridge, and then poof, it's gone? It starts with a missing sandwich, but it ends with a serious office mystery. Today, we are following the story of Marcus, who is tired of being hungry and is ready to catch the person stealing his food. In this video, you will learn real-life English for the workplace, how to handle office conflict professionally, useful vocabulary like red-handed and passive-aggressive. Stick around until the end to see the final confrontation. And don't forget, all the vocabulary used today is waiting for you in the community section and the description to test what you've learned today. Let's get into Chapter 1, The Empty Shelf. The clock on the wall finally struck 12 p.m. For Marcus, this was the best moment of the day. He had spent his entire Sunday evening preparing a special meal, grilled lemon chicken with roasted vegetables and a side of garlic quinoa. It wasn't just a meal, it was his reward for a long morning of spreadsheets and endless emails. Marcus walked into the office break room with a smile, already imagining the first bite. He opened the heavy glass door of the communal refrigerator. He looked at the top shelf, empty. He checked the middle shelf behind a jar of old pickles, nothing. He even checked the bottom drawer, hoping it had just fallen. His heart sank. The green Tupperware with his name clearly written on a piece of masking tape was gone. "Looking for something?" asked Sarah, the receptionist, as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "My lunch," Marcus replied, his voice echoing slightly in the empty fridge. "It's the third time this week. I don't understand. Why would someone take a bag with a name on it?" Sarah gave a sympathetic shrug. "It's been happening a lot lately. Someone even lost a whole lasagna last Tuesday. People are calling them the lunch thief." Marcus stood there for a moment, staring at the cold, empty space where his chicken should have been. He felt a mix of hunger and rising heat in his chest. This wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about respect. He had followed every office rule, yet someone was treating the fridge like a free buffet. Marcus closed the fridge door firmly. The hunt was on. By the next morning, Marcus had a plan to handle the situation calmly. He decided to start with a polite but firm warning to whoever was taking his food. He took a bright neon yellow Post-it note and a thick black marker from his desk. "Please do not eat lunch that is not yours," he wrote in neat capital letters. He walked into the break room and stuck the note directly onto the front of the refrigerator. As he walked away, he felt a small sense of accomplishment, believing that honesty would solve the problem. However, when he returned at noon, he saw something that made his blood boil. Someone had moved his note to the side and stuck a new, smaller blue note next to it. "Maybe if it didn't smell so good, I wouldn't be tempted, winky face," the mystery note read. Marcus couldn't believe the audacity of the lunch thief responding with a joke. It was a classic passive-aggressive move, mocking him without revealing their identity. He looked around the room, but everyone seemed busy with their own tasks, oblivious to the drama. The thief wasn't just hungry, they were playing a game, and they thought they were winning. Marcus realized that being polite was no longer an option if he wanted to eat his own food. He took a deep breath, crumpled both notes into a ball, and tossed them into the trash. The sticky note war had officially begun, but Marcus was already thinking 2 steps ahead. If words wouldn't work, he would have to find a way to make the thief regret their next bite. The office was no longer just a place of work. It was now a crime scene. Marcus sat at his desk, but he wasn't looking at his computer screen. Instead, he was watching his colleagues walk past, looking for any sign of guilt. He grabbed a notebook and titled the page, "The Suspect List." First on the list was Mr. Henderson, the senior manager, who always seemed to be in a rush. Marcus noticed that Mr. Henderson never brought a lunch bag, yet he always had a full plate in the break room. Next, he looked over at Leo, the new intern, who was constantly talking about his expensive gym membership. Leo was always hungry and often complained about how much money he spent on protein shakes. "He has the motive and the appetite," Marcus whispered to himself as he scribbled Leo's name down. Then there was Chloe, the quiet accountant who sat in the corner and rarely spoke to anyone. Marcus had seen her lingering near the refrigerator several times, looking around nervously before opening the door. He watched as Chloe stood up and walked toward the kitchen, but she only grabbed a bottle of water. It was harder than he thought to find a thief in a room full of professional people in suits. Everyone looked innocent, but Marcus knew that behind those smiles, someone was enjoying his spicy tuna wrap. He needed more than just guesses. He needed a strategy to narrow down the field. He decided to watch their reactions during the next staff meeting when he mentioned missing items. A guilty person usually looks away or fidgets when their crime is brought up in public. Marcus closed his notebook and leaned back, feeling like a detective in a high-stakes mystery. The suspect list was growing, but the evidence was still missing. He realized he couldn't just wait for them to slip up. He had to set a trap. Marcus knew that watching from a distance wasn't enough to catch a professional thief. He needed a way to make the thief identify themselves without him having to say a word. He spent that evening in his kitchen preparing a meal that looked absolutely delicious from the outside. It was a beautiful steak sandwich topped with caramelized onions and melting cheese. However, hidden deep inside the meat was a secret ingredient, a massive amount of ghost pepper hot sauce. This wasn't just spicy, it was the kind of heat that made your eyes water and your throat feel like it was on fire. Marcus carefully packed the sandwich into his usual green Tupperware and labeled it clearly with his name. The next morning, he placed the decoy meal right at the front of the middle shelf in the fridge. He went back to his desk and waited, keeping his ears open for any unusual noises coming from the break room. About 20 minutes after the lunch rush started, a sudden loud gasp echoed through the office. This was followed by the sound of someone coughing violently and the frantic splashing of water. Marcus felt a surge of excitement and stood up slowly, smoothing out his tie. He walked toward the break room, his heart hammering against his ribs like a drum. He found the door pushed wide open, and the smell of spicy peppers was already hanging in the air. Near the sink, someone was bent over, desperately splashing cold water onto their face and tongue. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching the scene with a calm, steady gaze. "Is the sandwich too spicy for you?" Marcus asked, his voice cool and professional. The person turned around, gasping for air. Their face turned a bright, alarming shade of purple. Marcus froze as he realized exactly who was standing there, holding his half-eaten lunch. The person standing by the sink was none other than Mr. Henderson, the senior manager. Marcus was stunned to see the man who ran the entire department looking so defeated. However, as Marcus stepped closer, he noticed Mr. Henderson was only holding a bottle of hot sauce he had found. "Marcus, this sauce is lethal. I was just trying to add some kick to my soup," Mr. Henderson wheezed. Marcus looked at the counter and saw his steak sandwich was still sitting inside the fridge, untouched. It was a false alarm. The manager wasn't the thief, just a man who liked spicy condiments. Marcus felt a wave of relief, but also a new sense of frustration that his trap hadn't worked yet. He realized the thief was smarter and more patient than he had originally thought. "I need to be more direct," Marcus muttered as he retreated back to his cubicle. He decided to skip his actual lunch hour to perform a literal stakeout of the break room area. He sat at a small table in the hallway with his laptop, pretending to be deeply focused on a report. From this angle, he had a perfect view of everyone entering and exiting the kitchen door. He watched Leo walk in, grab a protein shake, and walk out without looking at the fridge. He watched Chloe enter, but she only used the microwave to heat up a small bowl of rice. An hour passed, and Marcus began to feel his own stomach growling in protest. Just as he was about to give up, he saw a pair of polished shoes stop right in front of the refrigerator. The person didn't look around or hesitate. They moved with the confidence of someone who had done this before. Marcus held his breath and slowly closed his laptop, ready to move in for the catch. Marcus moved quietly, staying low as he approached the break room door. The person inside was standing with their back to him, humming a soft tune. With a swift motion, they reached into the fridge and grabbed Marcus's green Tupperware. They didn't even check the name on the tape before popping the lid open. Marcus stepped into the room, the floorboards creaking slightly under his weight. "That looks like a very familiar lunch," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. The person jumped, nearly dropping the container onto the tiled floor. It was David, the IT specialist, who usually spent his days hidden away in the server room. David stood frozen, a fork in one hand and Marcus's steak sandwich in the other. "David, I thought this was the extra food shelf," David stammered, his face turning pale. Marcus pointed directly at the bright green masking tape that clearly displayed his name. "My name is written in permanent marker, David. This isn't an extra shelf." The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the vending machine. David looked down at the floor, his shoulders slumping in a gesture of pure defeat. He'd been caught red-handed, with the evidence literally dripping from his fork. Marcus didn't yell. Instead, he just stared, waiting for a real explanation for the weeks of theft. The thrill of the hunt was gone, replaced by a strange sense of disappointment. "I've been tracking this for 3 weeks," Marcus said firmly. "Why did you do it?" David opened his mouth to speak, but for a moment no words came out. David set the Tupperware down on the counter with trembling hands. He didn't look angry or defensive. Instead, he looked completely exhausted. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," David whispered, rubbing his eyes behind his thick glasses. "My wife lost her job last month, and we've been struggling to keep up with the bills." Marcus felt his anger begin to soften as he listened to David's shaky voice. David explained that he had been skipping his own meals to make sure his kids had enough to eat. "I saw your lunches, and they looked so healthy and filling," David admitted, looking ashamed. "I thought in a big office like this, one missing meal wouldn't matter much." Marcus realized that while stealing was wrong, the lunch thief wasn't a villain. He was just a man facing a very difficult real-life problem and making a poor choice. The passive-aggressive note from earlier hadn't even been from David. It was from someone else entirely. David hadn't even seen the notes because he always came in late to avoid being seen. Marcus looked at his steak sandwich, which he had worked so hard to prepare. He wasn't hungry anymore, but he knew that David was. "Stealing is still not the answer, David," Marcus said, his tone much gentler now. "If you were struggling, you could have just asked for help." David nodded slowly, a single tear rolling down his cheek as he leaned against the counter. The confrontation Marcus had imagined was supposed to be a victory, but it felt much more complicated. Marcus had caught the thief, but now he had to decide what to do with the truth. The next morning, Marcus sat in a small windowless meeting room with David and the HR manager, Mrs. Gable. The atmosphere was heavy and formal, a sharp contrast to the casual chaos of the break room. Marcus had reported the incident, but he had done so with a specific request for a private meeting. Mrs. Gable looked over her glasses at David, who was staring intently at his own shoelaces. "David, taking a colleague's personal property is a serious violation of company policy," she began. She explained that under normal circumstances, this behavior could lead to immediate termination. Marcus watched David's hands shake, realizing that losing this job would make David's situation even worse. "I don't want him to be fired," Marcus interrupted, surprising both David and Mrs. Gable. Marcus explained that while the theft was wrong, he understood the stress David was under. He proposed a different solution. Instead of a permanent mark on David's record, they could find a way to make it right. Mrs. Gable leaned back, tapping her pen on the table as she considered the request. "The company has a zero-tolerance policy for theft, but we also value conflict resolution." She decided that David would receive a formal warning and would be required to attend a workplace ethics workshop. Most importantly, David had to find a way to provide restitution to Marcus for the stolen meals. David looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of immense relief and lingering guilt. He thanked Marcus for his mercy, promising that he would never touch another person's lunch again. The office court was over, and David walked out of the room with his job still intact. Marcus stayed behind for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. He had chosen empathy over punishment, but the tension in the office wasn't gone yet. True to his word, David began his journey to make things right with Marcus. On Monday morning, Marcus arrived at his desk to find a small, neatly wrapped box and a handwritten letter. The letter was a formal apology, expressing David's deep regret for the stress and hunger he had caused. Inside the box was a high-quality, insulated lunch bag with a heavy-duty combination lock on the zipper. "I know I'm the last person who should be giving you lunch gear," the note read, "but I wanted you to feel secure again." Marcus smiled at the irony of a locked lunch bag, but he appreciated the sincere effort David was making. Over the next 2 weeks, David brought in homemade treats for the entire office as a way to apologize to everyone. He shared a large tray of his family's traditional dumplings, which were a huge hit during the Friday break. Marcus noticed that David was also looking healthier and more energized than he had in months. It turned out that Marcus's decision not to get him fired had allowed David to stay on his feet. With his next paycheck, David insisted on buying Marcus a gift card to his favorite local deli. "This is for all the lemon chicken and quinoa I took," David said, with a shy, genuine smile. Marcus accepted the gift card, realizing that the restitution wasn't just about the money or the food. It was about David regaining his dignity and Marcus moving past the feeling of being a victim. The awkwardness in the break room began to fade, replaced by a new level of honesty between the two men. They started sitting together during lunch, talking about life beyond the walls of the office. The lunch thief was gone, and in his place was a coworker who had become a friend. Marcus realized that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to look at the person behind it. The atmosphere in the break room had completely transformed since the confrontation. The heavy glass door of the refrigerator was no longer a source of anxiety for Marcus. Instead of neon warning signs, the fridge was now covered in photos of office pets and upcoming birthdays. Marcus and David had started a new tradition called Shared Meal Fridays to help everyone connect. Every Friday, a different team member would bring a large dish to share with the entire office. This simple change removed the mystery of the lunch thief and replaced it with a sense of community. Marcus noticed that people were talking more and complaining less about the small stresses of the job. The new insulated bag David gave him sat on the shelf, but Marcus rarely felt the need to lock it anymore. Confidence and trust had returned to the workplace, making the mornings feel lighter and more productive. David's situation at home eventually improved as his wife found a new position at a local school. He often thanked Marcus for the second chance, knowing that one mistake didn't have to define his entire life. Marcus realized that while he had set out to catch a thief, he had actually built a better environment for everyone. He learned that clear boundaries are important, but empathy is what actually solves the root of a problem. As Marcus sat down with his lemon chicken one sunny afternoon, he shared a laugh with David across the table. The Lunch Thief Chronicles were finally over, and a new chapter of friendship had begun. The office was no longer just a place to work, it was a place where people looked out for one another. Marcus finished his meal with a satisfied smile, knowing his lunch and his peace of mind was safe.
The mystery of the lunch thief shows us that office drama is often more than just a missing sandwich. The mystery of the lunch thief shows us that office drama is often more than just a missing sandwich. By choosing communication and empathy over anger, Marcus didn't just save his lunch, he helped a colleague in need and changed the culture of his entire workplace. Real-life problems require real-world solutions, and sometimes a little bit of understanding goes a longer way than a locked fridge. And that is how Marcus caught the lunch thief and turned a bad situation into a great friendship. I hope this story helped you learn some useful English for your own workplace and gave you some ideas on how to handle difficult conversations. Don't forget to check the description box below. I have listed all the key vocabulary from today's episode, like passive-aggressive, red-handed, and restitution, along with their full meanings so you can use them in your next English conversation. What would you have done if you caught a coworker stealing your lunch? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button and subscribe to join our community. See you in the next story. Goodbye.